On January 14, 2026, at approximately 1:28 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the United States Department of State released a statement that sent shockwaves through 75 nations simultaneously. With no advance warning, no diplomatic courtesy calls, no transition period, Washington announced an indefinite suspension of all immigrant visa processing for citizens of these countries. Jamaica was on that list. In a single afternoon, the legal pathway that had connected Jamaican families to their loved ones in America for over 60 years was severed. Not paused, not delayed. Severed, but here is what almost nobody is talking about. 3 days later, Prime Minister Andrew Holness picked up the phone and spoke directly with the architect of this new American foreign policy, Secretary of State Marco Rubio. The official readout from that conversation was released to the press within hours. It mentioned hurricane recovery. It mentioned regional security partnerships. It mentioned Jamaica's improved travel advisory status. What it did not mention, not even once, was the visa freeze that had just devastated the dreams of thousands of Jamaican families. That silence is not a bureaucratic oversight. That silence is a message. And today, we are going to decode exactly what it means. Welcome to the Rubio Protocol. To understand the magnitude of what just happened, you need to understand one number: 3.36 billion. That is how many American dollars flowed into Jamaica through remittances in 2024 alone. To put that in perspective, remittances now account for nearly 17% of Jamaica's entire gross domestic product. In some years, that figure has climbed above 20%. No other revenue stream, not tourism, not bauxite, not agriculture, comes close to matching the economic lifeblood that flows from Jamaicans living abroad back to their families on the island. And here is the detail that should make every policymaker in Kingston lose sleep. 68 to 70% of those remittances originate from a single country, the United States of America. According to a survey conducted by the Bank of Jamaica, roughly 85% of remittance money is used for one purpose: survival, utility bills, rent, food, school fees, medicine. We are not talking about luxury spending. We are talking about the basic infrastructure of daily existence for nearly 3 in 10 Jamaican households. Now imagine what happens when the pipeline that feeds that system begins to narrow. When the promise of eventually joining your family in America, of building a better life, of escaping the limitations of a small island economy, suddenly vanishes into bureaucratic limbo. That is exactly what happened on January 21, 2026, when this freeze officially took effect. Let me be absolutely clear about what this suspension actually does, because there has been a tremendous amount of confusion circulating, some of it deliberate. This is not a tourist ban. Jamaicans can still apply for visitor visas. Students can still pursue F1 visas for American universities. The H-2A and H-2B temporary worker programs that bring thousands of Jamaicans to work on American farms each year remain operational. What has been frozen is something far more fundamental: immigrant visas, the visas that lead to green cards. The visas that allow a wife in Kingston to finally join her husband in Miami after years of paperwork and waiting. The visas that transform temporary separation into permanent reunification. There are currently nearly 4 million people worldwide waiting in family-based immigration backlogs. Some of these applicants have been waiting since 2001. That is not a typo. 25 years in a queue, and now they are told the line has stopped moving entirely. For Jamaicans specifically, the family preference categories have historically involved wait times stretching between 5 and 15 years, depending on the relationship. A United States citizen sponsoring an adult unmarried child could expect to wait over a decade. A green card holder sponsoring a spouse might wait 3 to 5 years. Those timelines were frustrating but predictable. You could plan around them. You could tell your children that their father would eventually bring them to America. You could tell your aging mother she would see her grandchildren grow up on American soil someday. That predictability is now gone, replaced by a single word that appears nowhere in the official State Department announcement, but defines its entire intent: indefinite. The justification offered by Washington centers on something called the public charge provision. This is immigration law terminology that dates back to 1882, making it one of the oldest continuous restrictions in American immigration history. The basic concept is simple. The United States reserves the right to deny entry to anyone deemed likely to become primarily dependent on government assistance. For over a century, this provision was applied narrowly. It targeted individuals who would require institutionalization or direct cash welfare. The interpretation was that America welcomed immigrants who could work and contribute, and simply wanted to ensure they would not immediately become wards of the state. But interpretations change with administrations, and under the current administration, the definition of public charge has been dramatically expanded. The November 2025 guidance sent to consular officers worldwide instructed them to consider a far broader range of factors: age, health status, English proficiency, education level, employment history, and even potential future medical needs. The stated reasoning for pausing immigrant visas from these 75 countries is that their nationals have, quote, a high rate of collecting public assistance at the expense of the U.S. taxpayer. Jamaica is now grouped alongside nations ranging from Afghanistan to Russia, from Haiti to Brazil, from Somalia to Thailand. 75 countries, billions of people, all deemed presumptively likely to become financial burdens on America. The policy is not based on individualized assessment. It is a blanket pause affecting everyone from an Oxford-educated Jamaican doctor to a grandmother who has waited 15 years to embrace her grandchildren. Now we arrive at the phone call itself. January 17, 2026, 3 days after the announcement, Prime Minister Andrew Holness connects directly with Secretary of State Marco Rubio. The official readout from the United States State Department was released the same day. It reads in part, Secretary of State Marco Rubio spoke today with Prime Minister Holness to discuss ongoing U.S. assistance in the aftermath of Hurricane Melissa and shared regional priorities. Secretary Rubio reaffirmed U.S. support for Jamaica's recovery and reconstruction. Secretary Rubio thanked Prime Minister Holness for his leadership as a strong and reliable regional security partner. Jamaica's Office of the Prime Minister released its own statement. It mentioned Secretary Rubio commending the government's management of hurricane relief efforts. It mentioned discussions about infrastructure reconstruction. It mentioned the upgrade of Jamaica's travel advisory from Level 3 to Level 2. Both statements agreed on one thing: this was a productive conversation. And both statements shared one glaring omission. Neither mentioned immigrant visas. Neither acknowledged the freeze. Neither addressed the crisis that had dominated Jamaican news coverage for 72 hours straight. Ask yourself this: is it remotely plausible that Andrew Holness spoke directly to America's top diplomat days after this sweeping policy was announced and simply forgot to bring it up? The Prime Minister of a nation where 17% of GDP flows from diaspora remittances. A leader facing immediate political pressure from opposition parties, from diaspora organizations, from families whose plans had just been demolished. A politician who had just won a third consecutive term in September 2025 and could not afford to appear weak or disconnected from his people's concerns. Did he simply not mention it? Of course not. The omission tells us everything. What was discussed was so sensitive, or the response so unfavorable, that neither government wanted it in the public record. If you are finding this analysis valuable, I need to ask you to do something right now. We are building a community of informed viewers who want to understand what is really happening behind the diplomatic press releases. Our goal is 50,000 subscribers, and every single subscription helps us continue producing this kind of in-depth, independent analysis. Take 2 seconds, hit that subscribe button and join us. Now, let me tell you why the silence makes perfect sense when you understand who was on the other end of that phone call. Marco Antonio Rubio was born in Miami, Florida in 1971. His parents, Mario and Oriels Rubio, were Cuban immigrants who arrived in the United States in 1956. His father worked as a banquet bartender. His mother worked as a hotel maid and Kmart stock clerk. Rubio has built his entire political identity around this immigrant story. The son of working-class Cubans who achieved the American dream through determination and sacrifice. He has spoken emotionally about his grandfather, who witnessed communism destroy his homeland and instilled in young Marco a deep appreciation for American freedom. There is profound irony in the fact that the man now overseeing the most sweeping restriction on immigrant visas in decades is himself the child of immigrants. Rubio's parents arrived during the Batista regime, before Castro took power. They were economic migrants seeking opportunity, not political refugees fleeing persecution. In other words, under the current public charge framework that Rubio now administers, his own parents might have faced serious scrutiny. A bartender and a hotel maid from a Caribbean nation, with limited English proficiency and modest education, seeking permanent residence in America. This is not stated to attack Secretary Rubio personally. It is stated to illuminate the complexity of the current moment. The American dream that Rubio's family accessed is the same dream now being denied to families who look remarkably similar to the Rubios of 1956. Rubio was confirmed unanimously by the United States Senate and took office on January 21, 2025. Exactly 1 year before the visa freeze took effect. He is the first Latino to serve as Secretary of State, the highest-ranking Hispanic American official in United States history. When Andrew Holness picked up that phone, he was not speaking to a mid-level bureaucrat. He was speaking to one of the most powerful foreign policy figures in the Western Hemisphere. A man whose own family history is intertwined with Caribbean migration. A man who understands intimately what immigration means to island nations. And that man said nothing publicly about reversing course. The timing of this policy was not accidental. It arrived precisely when Jamaica was at its most vulnerable. On October 28, 2025, Hurricane Melissa made landfall as a Category 5 storm, the third most powerful hurricane ever recorded globally and the most destructive storm in Jamaican history. The damage was catastrophic. Infrastructure across the island was devastated. The agricultural sector was decimated. Entire communities were flattened. According to early estimates, the direct cost exceeded $8.6 billion, representing more than 40% of Jamaica's annual GDP. Jamaica entered 2026 in crisis mode. The government was focused entirely on recovery and reconstruction. International aid was flowing in. The priority was restoring power, rebuilding roads, getting schools operational again. Into this moment of maximum vulnerability came the visa freeze. The Holness-Rubio call included extensive discussion of hurricane recovery. Secretary Rubio reaffirmed the United States' willingness to support Jamaica's reconstruction and resilience efforts through continued cooperation and partnership. including private sector participation. Read between those lines. Jamaica needs American support to rebuild. America has just closed a crucial immigration pathway. The implicit message is not subtle. Let me paint a picture of what this freeze means in human terms. There is a woman in Portmore right now who has been waiting 11 years for her immigrant visa to join her husband in Fort Lauderdale. They married in 2014. He returned to America to work, sending money home every month while the paperwork processed. Their children, now teenagers, have grown up knowing their father primarily as a face on a screen. She was scheduled for her consular interview in February 2026. That interview is now indefinitely postponed, not canceled because that would trigger certain legal protections, just suspended. Frozen, limbo, she cannot plan. She cannot tell her children when they will see their father in person again. She cannot make decisions about her own future because her future is now in the hands of bureaucrats in Washington who may or may not lift the pause next month, next year, or ever. Multiply her story by thousands, tens of thousands. There are diversity visa lottery winners who were selected in May 2025. By law, those visas must be issued by September 30, 2026, or they expire permanently with no extensions or carryovers. The freeze began January 21, leaving approximately 8 months. If it extends through midsummer, those winners lose everything. Years of hope, application fees, medical examinations, all rendered worthless. There are elderly parents who have been waiting to join their adult children in America, hoping to spend their final years surrounded by grandchildren they have only met through video calls. This is not abstract policy. This is the architecture of human lives being dismantled by administrative fiat. Now I want to explore something that almost no one is discussing publicly. What Prime Minister Holness's rhetoric since the phone call reveals about what he actually learned. Listen carefully to his 2026 New Year's message, delivered just days before we recorded this video. He spoke at length about climate shocks and geopolitical uncertainty. He emphasized that the global order is shifting and that geopolitical and geoeconomic maneuvering is reshaping trade, supply chains, peace, and security. He said Jamaica must use our strengths, seize opportunities, overcome our weaknesses, and protect ourselves from the threats that will come. Protect ourselves from threats. That is not standard nation-building rhetoric. That is the language of a leader who has been told, in no uncertain terms, that external conditions are changing in ways Jamaica cannot control. At his swearing-in ceremony in September 2025, Holness declared his vision to build an economy that provides opportunities for all within Jamaica. He spoke about leveraging Jamaica's geographic position as a gateway between North and South America. He emphasized logistics, infrastructure, human capital development. Notably, he did not speak about maintaining traditional migration pathways. He spoke about creating reasons for Jamaicans to stay home. This represents a fundamental pivot. For 60 years, since the Hart-Celler Act of 1965 opened American immigration to non-European nations, migration has been the unofficial pressure release valve for Jamaica's economy. When unemployment rose, ambitious Jamaicans could pursue opportunities abroad and send money home. What Holness seems to have understood from the Rubio Protocol is that this system is no longer reliable. America is not just temporarily pausing immigration. It is signaling a fundamental shift in posture. The United States no longer wants to serve as the absorption zone for surplus labor from developing nations. Jamaica's response to this new reality is already visible in policy priorities. The government has been aggressively developing what I call defensive infrastructure. The Caymanas Special Economic Zone, currently under construction, represents one of the most ambitious industrial development projects in Caribbean history. 583 acres of industrial land designed to house light manufacturing, business process outsourcing, warehousing, distribution, and IT services. The vision is extraordinary. Jamaica positioning itself as the fourth node in the global logistics chain, joining Rotterdam, Dubai, and Singapore as a major hub for international trade. The Kingston Logistics Park is expanding. The Port of Kingston, already the largest transshipment port in the Caribbean, has seen cargo volumes grow by over 60% since 2020. The government has signed an $80 million agreement with CMA-CGM, one of the world's largest shipping companies, to expand container terminal capacity. These are not random infrastructure projects. They are components of a coherent strategy to transform Jamaica from a labor-exporting economy into a labor-absorbing economy, to create sufficient opportunity domestically that immigration becomes a choice rather than a necessity. But here is the brutal reality. These transformations take decades to mature. The Special Economic Zone will not employ tens of thousands of Jamaicans next year. The logistics hub vision requires sustained investment over 10 to 15 years to fully realize. Meanwhile, the visa freeze is happening now. The families separated by immigration backlogs need solutions now. Jamaica is being forced to sprint a marathon. I want to pose a question to you directly, and I genuinely want to hear your thoughts in the comments. Not generic engagement, but your real analysis. If the American dream is effectively closed for the foreseeable future, do you believe Jamaica has the institutional capacity, the economic infrastructure, and the political will to provide genuine opportunity for its most ambitious citizens? Can a nation of 3 million people, recovering from a historic hurricane, competing against global economic forces, truly pivot from migration as survival strategy to domestic development as primary path? Comment below with your honest assessment. This matters. There is another dimension to this story that deserves examination: the regional implications. Jamaica is not alone on this list. Every independent English-speaking Caribbean nation is affected. The Bahamas, Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, all 75 countries, but the Caribbean concentration is striking. Jamaica, under Prime Minister Holness's CARICOM chairmanship, is positioned as de facto leader of the regional response. What happens in Kingston matters for Bridgetown and Port of Spain and Georgetown. The Jamaica Gleaner editorial board, in a piece published days after the Holness-Rubio call, made a pointed observation. The timing of the conversation, they noted, is unlikely coincidental. They suggested Jamaica may be attempting to strike a deal that would insulate it from the more extreme of President Trump's immigration, trade, and security policies. The readout mentioned that Secretary Rubio thanked Prime Minister Holness for his leadership as a strong and reliable regional security partner, and underscored shared concerns about drug and firearms trafficking, narco-terrorists, and transnational crime. Is Jamaica trading security cooperation for immigration access? Is there a quid pro quo being negotiated that neither side wants to acknowledge publicly? These are the questions Jamaicans deserve answers to, but which neither government seems willing to address transparently. Let us zoom out and consider the historical arc we are witnessing. In 1965, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Immigration and Nationality Act at a ceremony staged at the base of the Statue of Liberty. The law, sponsored by Senator Philip Hart and Representative Emanuel Seller, abolished the racist national origins quota system that had restricted immigration primarily to Western Europeans since the 1920s. For the first time, every country received equal treatment. A cap of 20,000 immigrant visas per year with priority given to family reunification and skilled workers. Johnson declared that the new law would repair a very deep and painful flaw in the fabric of American justice. That legislation opened the door to Caribbean immigration on a scale never before possible. The community that now numbers over 1.4 million people with Jamaican ties in America, the community that sends home over $3 billion annually, that community exists because of Hart-Celler. For 60 years, family reunification was the foundation of American immigration policy. The principle was simple: families belong together, and immigrants who maintain strong family bonds integrate more successfully into American society. What we are witnessing now is the philosophical dismantling of that framework. The new posture treats family reunification not as a humanitarian good, but as a potential vector for welfare dependency. This is not a policy adjustment. It is a worldview transformation. The real story of the Rubio Protocol is not what was said, it is what was understood. Andrew Holness entered that phone call hoping for reassurance. What he likely received was clarity. The United States under the current administration views immigration not as a mutual benefit, but as a unilateral privilege it can revoke at will. Countries like Jamaica are expected to accept this reality and adjust accordingly. The silence in the readout tells us that Holness received no meaningful concessions. If he had secured exemptions for Jamaica, you can be certain the office of the Prime Minister would have announced it immediately. If there were a timeline for resumption of processing, it would have been shared to calm public anxiety. Instead, we got hurricane recovery and travel advisories. Diplomatic pleasantries that signaled to the Jamaican people, nothing has changed, but something profound has changed. The relationship between Jamaica and the United States has been fundamentally reframed. Jamaica is no longer a partner with assumed access to the American immigration system. Jamaica is now a supplicant that must prove its value to maintain any access at all. The door is not just stuck, the door is being locked. And Jamaica must now build a house worth living in for those who can no longer leave. Somewhere in Spanish Town right now, a mother is explaining to her children that their father's visa interview has been postponed indefinitely. She does not know if it will be rescheduled. Somewhere in Manville, an elderly woman is realizing she may never see her daughter's home in Brooklyn. The grandchildren she planned to help raise will grow up as faces on a phone screen. These are not statistics. These are Jamaican lives, caught in the gears of a policy machine that does not know their names, does not understand their sacrifices, does not care about their dreams. The Rubio Protocol is not really about phone calls or diplomatic readouts. It is about power. Who has it, who does not, and what happens to ordinary people when power shifts. If this analysis resonated with you, I need you to do 3 things. First, subscribe to this channel. We are building toward 50,000 subscribers who want genuine insight, not surface-level news coverage. Your subscription tells us this work matters. Second, share this video with someone who needs to understand what is really happening, not the sanitized press release version, the full picture. Third, leave a comment with your perspective. Do you think Jamaica can successfully pivot to a domestic opportunity model? Do you believe the freeze will be lifted within the year? What should the government prioritize? In our next video, we will analyze the specific economic sectors Jamaica is betting on to replace lost migration income. The logistics hub, the creative industries, the business process outsourcing expansion. Until then, stay informed, stay critical, and remember, the most important changes always happen in the silences between the headlines.